everyone, and welcome back to the Times of India's Design Next Legacy Forward, brought to you by ETH. Without further ado, I would now move on to our next podcast featuring Gaurav Malhotra, Managing Director, Hansgrohe, India, in conversation with Aninda Bagchi, Senior Director, Project Management, CBRE, India. Over to you, Aninda.
Thanks, Shirley, for that, and welcome, Gaurav. Thank you so much for your time. Without really going much into it, let's just straight away jump into the topic which was, shared across. Rather a statement, I would say. I mean, old age wisdom or new age guile. What makes a successful name? But honestly, when I was going through this and when this came across, before you actually, before I actually ask you what's your take on the statement, but let me just ask you something more simple. Like we normally, ask people a very generic question. Do you think you're successful? How successful do you think you have been so far in your career span? So, I mean, on the very basic note on that, what exactly is success for you? And what does success mean to you? And how successful would you consider yourself, considering you've spent a wide variety of roles? That's what you've done across, in your career span. And how has the journey been? I mean, what worked with you there? Was it the experiences of every organization, or was it adapting to new cultures? Guile is probably something which may or may not be the right word to put it across, but just wanted to hear more on that note from you.
Thanks so much, and it's a great question to actually start with. I think one of the amazing things in terms of the answer would be that success has meant differently in different stages of the career. I think when you start off your career, success is all about quick wins, about numbers. You are judged on a day-to-day basis. You judge yourself on a regular basis. But I think after 21 years, I would like to say that success for me is about three things so far in the journey. And I'm sure as I put in more years, I will have more things to add to this. But largely, I think three platforms. One, if you've enjoyed the journey so far, I think that's the single most important thing at the end of whatever time sprint you put into any industry or any career span. Second is that if there has been a lot of learning for yourself as well along the way. I think the passion is only sustained if there is significant learning around the way. And that's what it has been for me across industries. As you rightly mentioned, I've worked, although the last 15 years have been in the building and construction industry in general and more closer to the bathroom. The last one I would say is developing trust. When I say developing trust, I mean to all the critical stakeholders, who've been a part of that journey. Because I think success comes when the people that you interact with, the key stakeholders that you make a difference with on a business perspective, trust you. And I think that answers everything. I mean, it's clear that a business leader has to be, looking towards the financials. Ultimately, the aim is to generate profit. But profit, sales, revenue, all of that happens if you actually have trust with your key stakeholders. So for me, that's been pretty much the key aspect of what successful is all about. And I do believe that after 15 years, especially in this industry, I think I've enjoyed my taste of success.
That's wonderful, Gaurav, because I mean, obviously, when you're there at such a position leading, I mean, you alone would not be able to, carry on the baton of the organization. I mean, and you do need people who would equally contribute to your success. So your definition, probably from an organization perspective, of being successful is not only you, but a lot of your success depends on how the people who work with you, probably how successful they are on it. And I'm sure, and as much as I've read across and gone through things written about you, it's been fairly successful in your journey so far. A question, which brings across, I mean, unlike Kohelika and unlike Aisha, who already have a lineage with them, and that can be perceived in many a way by people when you say that when it's an unsaid thing that they come across with that sort of a lineage. However, from your perspective, if I would look at it, it's more of an organization, and there are varied people. There is no such predefined things which have been there, or perceptions which would have been built, for Sanjay or Mrs. Kohli per se, and then Kohelika and Aisha being under the pressure of that. But for you, when it comes to an organizational level, how have you seen things working differently in the years that, in the 21 years that you spanned across? How has the customer or the end user perceptions or the requirements or the wants changed from a company such yours? Because at the end of the day, you guys also represent a brand, and a lot of it is the faith that people have on the brand when they go on to make across a purchase. So it's not a lineage, but it's a brand reputation which is there. How has it been different, or how would you say that, what are the parameters, or how does then one attribute the success of not an individual out here, but at an organizational level? How do you measure that, or how do you define that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to be honest, a number of points in my answer can be taken from what you talked. I think first is, you're absolutely right. It's not about an individual perspective for me. It's about being part of a brand story, representing a company which is much bigger than any individual effort. And to be honest, I think there are two parts of the answer that I'd like to give in this. One is that, the fundamental DNA of the company, and in this case, Hansgrohe, doesn't change over time. Which is about product competence, which is about an innovative platform, which is about design leadership. But the delivery on each of this aspect changes by focusing on the most important, part of the equation, which is the consumer. So I think the key is to always not look only inward. I think there is a fair bit of internal assessment that has to be done on multiple capabilities. But more importantly, do that assessment and design your capabilities on the basis of the outward need. So the fact that we work with so many designers across the globe, these are people who interact, on a much larger level than, let's say, a company alone can. Across continents, if you look at some of our brilliant relationships, it's been over Japan, it's been over Europe, the US. All these designers are much closer and much more connected to the end consumers. So it's very important that the company has the grasp and the touch with evolving trends, with product needs that change over time. The fact that, these designers also come with diverse backgrounds, because there is a cultural aspect to evolving trends. So this is what helps us play, or rather win, on our strengths, which is, of course, the fact that we deliver fantastic product, the German quality. From a lineage perspective, I would say the company has a lineage. We all know that the German quality is something that is respected across the globe. So a mixture of playing on your strengths, but at the same time always looking at consumer trends, always looking at consumer needs, I think is what leads to success that this brand enjoys across the globe. So I think that's the right mix that we should always.
I think, yeah, that's a fair enough response. But apart from you, there are many other, call it your peers, call it competition, call it other brands who are there, and each one wants to be successful. Each one wants to stay in the business, and they would probably do whatever it comes to, whether it's innovation, whether it's technology, whether it's investing in the company, in the people. Now, when you have such a situation like this, and especially in the current times, and the reason I emphasize more is that we all know that how the last year has been with us, pandemic, pre-pandemic, and there are a dime a dozen reports which all consultancies, organizations are coming across with how the real estate market would fare, how hospitality would fare, and in this entire plethora, what works according to you to stay afloat in the industry? I mean, there is obviously the networking skills, PR skills, XYZ, but if I were to ask you to tell me three things, that helps you to keep afloat in the business and connect with your customers to be successful, what would those be?
So I think two of them would be internal and one of them would be external. But if you ask me, the external thing is the most important thing. So the external part actually is about leveraging your relationships. First of all, establishing and nurturing your relationships. Because especially in this part of, I would say, the world, Asia as a continent, our experience is that the personal engagement side is extremely important. I would say Europe runs a little bit more on structure, more formal structures on processes, and I think that's a strength by itself. But besides having that in our system, an extra spark, I like to call it that, that we have in our continent is the people-to-people relationships and the engagement that comes along with that. So I think it's extremely important, especially at times when business fundamentally is challenged, because you cannot only look at your challenges and say that the rest of the world out there has to cope with it, but I will focus more on my challenges. So it's very important that you have a partnership that is nurtured. The fact that you understand, let's say your trade relationships would have an even bigger issue. Your pockets as a company could be much deeper than what you would have for, let's say, an individual trade partner that you have. So I think working along with them, understanding how they are viewing things, understanding their paradigm is extremely important. So that part of it has to be something, and I think the company that manages that always is able to leverage its own investments far better in terms of a successful outcome. But the other two aspects are, again, one more on a business perspective. It is to drive efficiencies. I think everybody is being challenged in the last 9 months or so. And I'm extremely happy to say that Hansgrohe probably would be one of the very few brands that actually grew close to 20% in the domestic market last year. And that came because, one, we continued to have a fundamental platform of a differentiated product. And that's actually the third strength. But more importantly, we focused to what we could do and how we could kind of do that better. And I think that's the big thing. As long as your mind is clear, as long as you know your strengths and you focus on driving efficiencies in each micro bracket of your operations, I think relatively you would always do better. Obviously, the market influences performance of the industry in general, but generally you will be one of the better ones out if you do that. So I think other than the external relationships, you have to focus on driving efficiencies. And the third one is your core platform, which I've already talked about. I mean, in my journey, I have seen exceptional operations which cannot thrive, let's say, without the brand success, and vice versa. So you can have exceptional brands, but if you don't have operational efficiencies and operational strength, you would struggle on that as well. So I think a mixture of these three platforms would differentiate the winners from the losers, even in testing times. And I wouldn't like to say losers, let's just say different relative levels of success.
You know what, Gaurav, at some point of time, and we face that with our own, when we go across into the market and scouting for projects and trying to tell that, I mean, of course, we know that as CBRE and over the years that we've worked in, we do have enough experience and skill sets and expertise and everything in house, and there is obviously enough evidence which is there to tell that that there is work which is being done well and to the client's requirement. But what we've been facing, and I'm sure maybe you could as an organization too as well, is that there are many more number of players today in the market as it was probably 10 years back, and it seems to be growing. The number seems to be growing every day. There are smaller firms. There are people who are advisors now to the clients. They are freelancing consultants. And when it comes across to a project, or let's say even a product, and delivering that, and because it is all, I mean, to a large extent, it's sales at the end of the day as well. And there has to be, business has to be run, and there has to be revenue generated for it. And we have more often than not been asked for a price to deliver our products, which obviously we do not feel that, that can do justice to the service excellence and delivery that we have. And we let go of stuff. We said that, we cannot be, working at, I mean, you can be branding it as cost effectiveness, but it's not really cost effective, but it's just that clients at times trying to, ask for a price which is really not justifiable to the level of service excellence that is expected. Do you guys face similar things? And have you lost out on business for that? I mean, have you actually purposefully said no, that, we cannot be doing this not because we're not capable or not because we do not have the excellence in it, but it's not a fair ask for our delivery. Do you face similar challenges?
Absolutely. I think the easiest answer to that is that we consider only maybe I would put the number as 7 to 8% of the overall faucet opportunity as our accessible market. So it actually starts from that stage itself. And of course, we have taken a fairly niche positioning, and and hence the lower accessible market for us. But I think it also comes with your brand strength and a considered decision. So I think while I am not a big fan of being exceptionally strong or small, and I think scaling up is our number one agenda. The key is not to have only one goal at the cost of your own key strengths. So there are lots of cases where we've had to say no. At the same time, and I'm going to be very honest, there are some strategic wins that you go after as well. So I don't think you have one answer to this question. What you do not do is to try and compromise your or your company's position by a quick win. So I think that's not something that we are looking at. We want to make sure that our brand adds value, but not by destroying value internally. I think that's the key line that I would go. And of course, it can also be driven by specific situations. Sometimes it's a future investment that you do. Sometimes it's a strategic fit. Sometimes it's a tactical decision. So any good business manager or team will always evaluate situations and be maybe more aggressive at times than not. But in terms of having to say no, or in terms of even having a very small macro opportunity itself, definitely we are in that position all the time. What we do is keep challenging ourselves too. We want to grow bigger. We want to be a little bit more available to the consumers in this country. So we keep challenging our own cost positions, but not by compromising on our key strengths and what our brand stands for.
So what works in this sort of a situation? Does old age wisdom work out here, or is it just a new style of working, or a new age astuteness, as Aisha had rightly pointed out, that it's guile may not be probably the right word, but let's call it. But in situations when you're faced, such as these, to choose or not to choose, or yet go after in a strategic way, what has worked for you?
I think neither one can work by itself, and I think the key is to find the sweet spot where both these let's say approaches kind of find middle ground. Because you see much sharper conversations around the short term when you talk about new age guile. I think it's fair to say that people want more out of the situation now or in the immediate short term than they were willing to let go from a conventional old age wisdom perspective. At the same time, they are more informed as well. Now, I am not trying to say that traditionally expertise was not as strong. In fact, probably it was stronger. But in terms of just the number of sources from where you can derive information, sometimes you meet customers that know as much, if not more, about your product or company than, to be honest, in my career as a salesperson, than I knew myself. So I think it's about finding the sweet spot. It's very important to explain the value that a product offering or service gives over time, and not look at an immediate ROI on a very, very short-term basis. And that's how these conversations go. Do we manage to do that all the time? Absolutely not. There are many times when I would say I would walk out of a conversation like this feeling that I could not get what I wanted. But I think the quest is always that. And over time, I think once you know more and more about what a consumer would want, once you try to identify certain key points on which this thing either moves ahead or not, you modify your approaches to kind of getting more of that sweet spot more often.
So would you agree, or what would be your view if I were to tell you that creativity, or let's say even innovation for that matter, because I mean, to stay afloat and to be in the business, you've got to innovate literally every year. Otherwise, how do you differentiate yourself with respect to the others? And there is a price you have to pay for that innovation. And if I were to say that, probably then creativity, that would come at a cost, if not at a premium. But to be able to differentiate and to be able to live up to the intent of what that product has to offer. And it's always tough to get that right the first time. I mean, you have an idea, you have a product, You don't know how much of an acceptability of that product, in your case specifically, would be with the consumer. So you would have to go back and forth. There would be iterations, there would be discussions, there would be market surveys, there would be researches, and nothing comes free. So it's an investment that you're going to be making. Now, when you actually come across and launch that product into the market, then obviously it will come at some cost, like I said, not at a premium. And vis-a-vis, you will have other products which are carved under the wire of under a rope, if I were to say, of being cost effective and cheap, and it would be branded as for the masses and not for the classes. I mean, that's how I see advertisements, coming across and say. So uh, how do you as a professional then, how do you tread that line, that balancing act, like you did, you just mentioned a while back, that you've got to find that sweet spot. But how do you actually do that? How do you tread the line carefully between creating experiences through your products vis-a-vis sustaining your business? Because there are many more people doing the same thing.
I think excellent question, because it gives me a chance to give you a very, very specific answer on this one, in which most of the points that you raised, I think we were successfully able to navigate. I mean, globally, Hansgrohe is known to be a showering leader. Of course, we have huge strength on the overall bathroom, but our showering innovations have always resonated with the customers very, very strongly. Now, just some facts: that our average realization out of an overhead shower or a wall-mounted shower is nearly 10x that of a regular, I mean, a median premium offering. So I'm not talking about the entry level stuff. I mean, with that, it might even be 25x or so. But let's say the median of the premium offerings, we would be probably close to 8 to 10 times that in terms of our average realization. Now, how do we manage that? I think it's easy to say by being innovative. Of course we are, but we know the Indian consumer doesn't give that kind of a premium purely for an innovation. So we play on multiple points. The product strength is what it is, and I don't need to speak about that. I think that's been established already. We also play with the aesthetic side. We play with the experience side. So a beautiful example would be our Infinity overhead shower, which we kind of launched as a platform just last year. And we had a phenomenal success. I mean, it's a single line that has contributed almost 6 to 7% of our annual revenues just on one line. And that's more than what any other line would have done over years. But if you look at it, one, of course, we bought innovation at a relatively more accessible price point. It's important. It's key that the India market does not give you crazy premiums. So it's important that you work in line with that. We also made sure that you had multiple finish options. So we have a beautiful matte white. Besides the chrome, we even have a matte black option. That's something that visually, first of all, attracts the customer, because then you get a chance to have a longer conversation with this stakeholder, be it a designer or a customer. The third thing we did was on the functionality. So we introduced a new powder rain concept, which is all about how water, touches you and how you feel while under a shower. Now, what is the price to have a phenomenal feeling while taking a shower? I mean, we all know the stress that every one of us has. And I'm not trying to make a melodramatic statement, but I, for one, would love to have, 5 or 10 minutes of bliss under a shower, maybe less. I mean, I don't think anybody gives 10 minutes now to a shower, but even 5 minutes of bliss under a shower. So we make sure that on the product innovation side, it's phenomenal. We make sure that aesthetically also the product kind of appeals to a customer. And more importantly, functionally, the experience that one gets out of that product delivery is really exceptional as well. And to be honest, unless you hit it right on all these three fronts and then the other relationships that we talked about, I don't think you are able to get that sweet spot too often. So do we do it every time? No, but I think the quest is again towards this. And I think that's been the reason why we've been successful year after year with our innovations. And that also comes with the fundamental closeness to our consumer needs that we have.
That's very well put across, Gaurav. But I mean, my just one more thing. I think one thing that you do as an organization, or maybe just you as Gaurav within the system, that convinces the end user I mean, okay, in the long run, it is the end user that you have to deliver to, but you also need to convince your internal team when you come across with, say, a new strategy or a new business approach to things, which is a mix of smart use of knowledge and technology. So I'm just trying to drive synonyms of old age wisdom vis-a-vis, new age guile. But what is that one thing that you do within the system that then defines somewhere the path to your success?
Yeah, great point. Actually, I think again, two aspects to this. One is look at the we more than the me. I think it's extremely important to have a collective aligned effort than a personal effort. But secondly, and a little bit closer to the old age wisdom versus new age guile perspective, is to look at something which is emotional and yet innovative and yet intelligent. So the new word obviously for us is emotional intelligence. Now, when you look at old age wisdom, it's a little bit more driven from an emotional perspective. When you look at the way technology has blazed through in the recent times, it's all about experiences and even things that get obsolete over minutes in some cases, and of course months and years in some cases as well. So I think a blend of the two. You have to make sure that you are looking at things from a perspective of having the people side, the human side of it involved. You have to look at it that the technology appeals to the new generation and make sure that the product does not get obsolete over time. Another brilliant example could be Rain Tunes, which is something that we will launch. It's already been launched in Europe, where you're looking at a consumer experience through a digital screen, which is ultimately going to give you a showering experience. So you are looking at integrating sound, you're looking at integrating light, you're looking at integrating basically an entire experience from a technology platform that appeals to a new, let's say a younger customer, but at the same time integrating that kind of bliss or that emotional appeal, including certain predefined settings. So if it's an old person who loves to hear the sound of water falling in a forest, you can actually integrate the visual theme as well. And just wants that piece of silence, you can get that. If it's a younger consumer who wants, a higher decibel music output coming out of it, that particular shower at that time, you can integrate that. So I think it's about emotional intelligence being blended with new age technology. And that's when you kind of, get the right tune out of the product. So I think.
Thank you. That's really very, very enlightening. And it's also gives us some hope of, looking forward to something new and something innovative. I think pretty much we've summed it up in, our pointers on what we've been talking about, the mix and the sweet spot that we need to find across. And I do hope for people who are trying to do that balancing act between, treading cautiously between wisdom as well as adapting themselves to the technology, they do find that sweet spot and thereby, go across and be successful, whether in terms of their own self and parameters or the bar that they set themselves across, or maybe across with the perceptions of society or people at large as well. Gaurav, thank you so much for your time. It's actually been lovely talking to you on the pointers that we had and things that we've been deliberating across. Look forward to the new products coming across and experiencing them as well. Thank you so much. Shirley, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. Thank you so much, Aninda. It was nice to understand your story of the blend from the old and the new generation that you've been talking about. Thank you so much for sparing this time. I know you had to run in quick because you had another meeting that was scheduled already. Thank you so much, Gaurav.